The topic for the day, cybersecurity for the cloud era. It's funny, cybersecurity risk has grown exponentially with the pandemic. But a lot of people don't really aware of all the risks that they're exposing themselves to. I think that there's a lot of things that you can do to protect your data. When you understand the risks and you understand what you can do to protect it, it really positions you for the ability to leverage all these amazing tools that we love using in the cloud. And there's great tools out there that have built-in security that is amazing, but sometimes these tools don't have the level of security that we need built into them. And so we need to build our own little security app stack. So we'll be sharing that with you today. So for the agenda today, Jim is going to give us a little primer. I'm going to let him kick us off with a short 5 to 10 minute session. And then I'm going to be going into my agenda with you guys. Now, Jim, do you want to kick us off? Well, actually, maybe I should talk a little bit about housekeeping first, and then I'll let you take control. So on the housekeeping side, again, as I mentioned to you live, those of you live on Facebook, please feel free to post your questions in the chat, and we'll move those over into here. For those of you who are joining us live on the Zoom session, what we ask is that if you're going to ask a question, please use the Q&A, and that will allow us to monitor those first and foremost. When we're done with the Q&A, we will do our best to look at the chat questions. And if anyone wants to actually ask a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. And with that, Jim, do you want to take us, well, maybe I should introduce you first. Jim is an internationally renowned best-selling author on disruption and innovation. And I don't think there's a hotter, more disruptive topic right now than cybersecurity. So who knows, maybe there's another book coming out on cybersecurity and disruption. But Jim, I'm waiting on bated breath to hear what you have to tell us.
Okay, Andrew. Well, we're going to absolutely rock and roll. We're going to move through this really quickly. We'll pause and take questions after. It's going to be a very short presentation. If anybody wants to reach me afterwards, it's just jim@jimharris.com. I'm on LinkedIn. If you connect with me, I'll accept it. Mention this webinar. Your network will grow by 27 million people instantly. And I want to start with this. Cybersecurity is huge. In 2021, there's $6 trillion of cost and damage to corporations, society, governments, and individuals. And that's going to basically double to 10.5 trillion by 2025. So this is really serious. And companies that you would expect to be best of class in terms of protecting privacy, companies like Equifax have had data breaches. And that data breach cost Equifax $575 million in settlement. The government of Canada's CRA has been hacked. Facebook, there's 1.5 billion Facebook users' basic information out there for sale right now on the dark web. And in Canada, Desjardins financial institution out of Quebec has had 9.7 million Canadians' records hacked. So this is to say that every single organization is threatened by cyber risk. And if you think about it, 2021 really is the year of ransomware. And why is that? Well, with all of us working from home, security has become more important than ever before. And with all this remote logging onto systems, hackers have been having a field day. And this reminds me of a quote that John Chambers, the former CEO of Cisco, used to always say. And here I am with him at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. John used to always say there are only two kinds of organizations: those that have been hacked and those that don't know that they've been hacked. This just kills me. So phishing is the most common reason for ransomware, phishing emails. And if you don't know what that is, you need to get up on it. And poor user practices and gullibility, training, those are the top three things. So what is phishing? Well, phishing is when you're sent an email that asks you to log into one regular system you log into saying, our security has updated. You just have to re-log in to reestablish your connection. And so you do that, and the hacker gets all your information and can now get into your system using your login details. So you would think, this is such low level. No. John Podesta was the White House chief of staff, and he was Hillary Clinton's chair of her 2016 campaign. He had a spear phishing attack. Now, spear phishing is like phishing, but the hackers research you and go, oh, well, he would have had an email from somebody in our IT department. Here's the email they used to send from our IT department. He called the IT department and said, should I log in? And they said, oh, send it over to me. It looks legitimate. So he did. His own IT department told him to log in. And 200,000 or 20,000 pages of Hillary's emails were hacked by Russian hackers, leaked to Wikipedia, and it perhaps cost her the election. So, but it's not just about technology. We really, being secure is about people, it's about mindset, it's about culture, and it's about training. This is an amazing infographic on what is phishing and how not to get hooked. And I know a company, an SME, small medium enterprise, that trained every single person to identify what are the threats of phishing. They had these posters up all around their workplace. And then the training company, 2 weeks after the training, did a fake phishing exercise that 20% of the people, even after the training, still keyed in their login and their password. So we have to be eternally vigilant on this stuff because companies can't afford to be disrupted. In other words, we have to be preemptive. And as people who work with CPA for IT are IT professionals by default, this is something that's really important for you to sell to your clients. So what are some of the things we can do? Well, first is password management. Having a password vault and really increasing the strength of passwords so that they can't be hacked by brute force. Using a VPN. There are dozens of VPNs, and you would not believe how cheap these are to use all the time. Two-factor and multi-factor authentication. This is where everything has to go. And of course, with my smartphone, I can have biometric verification and multi-factor. I could have my voice print as well as the code, multi-factor, not just two-factor. Updating software is absolutely key, and turning on those auto updates for your clients. So identity theft is something that's occurring to people because their information's getting hacked, credit card fraud, mobile fraud. And so our smartphones have become absolutely essential. I once had at Rogers somebody trying to say they were me and they lost the SIM, and could they port my number over to a new SIM? That is another way to hack. This is going to increase the adoption of blockchain. And what we really need to do is get to AI systems identifying when behavior that's bizarre is occurring on our system. If you get on a plane, the pilots check every single system every time before they take off. And that's what we really need to get to. An engine check light for every single thing. Like all of a sudden, why is, Jim has never downloaded anything from Dropbox that equals the entire size of Dropbox. Why is he downloading everything right now? And we need to continually be practicing eternal vigilance. This is Pablo Casal, who was the world's most famous, best cellist. And at 94, he was asked, why do you keep practicing 3 hours every day? And he replied, because I think I'm beginning to notice some improvements. We have to continually improve on cybersecurity. It doesn't matter how good we are, how good our company is. It's only as good as the weakest link, meaning one person in the organization who falls victim to a phishing attack can start to unlock keys to the organization. And especially as we're getting more and more real-time medical data, this is going to become critical. So this industry is growing faster than other areas of the IT industry because we've all been working from home. So it's critical that IT professionals are up on this. If you want to get some articles that I've written, just email me, jim@jimharris.com. And I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew. And I want to just thank Andrew for holding webinars like this, which are absolutely essential to IT professionals to always up our game. And this is Cybersecurity Month. And so this is so appropriate, Andrew, that you're holding this right now. And I'm just at my 10-minute mark. So I'm going to throw it back over to you and stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you, Jim. That was an amazing session, as always. We can always count on you for bringing us great information, but in a really great way. I love your slide deck. It's just the only problem with it, Jim, is it's going to make my presentation look shoddy comparison. So as an accountant, unfortunately, my session and my slide deck is probably a little bit more planned. But I'm going to reiterate some of the key messages that I think you talked about today. Now, for those of you who don't know who we are, my name is Andrew Wohl. I'm the managing partner here at CPA4IT. We're an accounting firm specializing in IT professionals, as Jim mentioned, and we've been doing that since 1984. So I think this topic is really important for all small businesses, but I think for the IT consultants out there, really you have an opportunity to really push this agenda with your clients and make sure that they're moving forward, because there really are a lot of things that can be done to protect your security. We're going to cover some of those today. And Jim, you hit on, really some of the key things. Is this isn't even so much about technology, it's about education and human behavior. So specifically what I'm going to chat about today is just some general cybersecurity awareness. We're going to be talking about social engineering and what that is, some ways to prevent social engineering. Then we're also going to look at phishing, how to prevent phishing, which Jim's talked a little bit about. Data breaches and 6 ways to protect your data. And then we're going to help you to build a security app stack. So some great tools out there that you can use today to increase the level of security for your data and your identity. And then we'll close up with some additional information and links to a free checklist that you guys can use to go through and make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect your data. So let me get on to the next slide here and get my mouse in the right place. So Jim's hit the nail on the head. I mean, cybersecurity is at an all-time crisis. Cybercrime is up 600% year over year, and a lot of that does stem from the pandemic, where people are now bringing their own devices into the infrastructure. Those firewalls and securities that were protecting the internal network are now exposed to people's general homes, maybe even their own home devices, and those aren't being patched and kept up to date. And Jim, you covered some of the big hacks that have come through recently, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. And there's a great article on ZDNet which goes through month by month of all the different articles. I'm not going to bore you guys with that, but like some of the other ones are like Bombardier, the Microsoft Exchange server, CNI Insurance, Florida's water supply, and supply chain is a big thing that they're starting to go through and attack now. There's the Colonial Pipeline, which obviously everyone heard about, Toll Group, Marriott, Magellan, Twitter, Garmin, SolarWinds, the list just goes on and on and on. And the one thing to note is that they now move on to what they're referring to as the triple extortion ransomware, where they will try to encrypt the data and extort for that. They will steal the data and extort for that. And then they will attempt to go after the end consumers or clients and attempt to extort them as well using the information that they've gathered. So being really vigilant about your security and your data and your information is really paramount to protecting the wealth that you've accumulated, because our goal here is to help you organize your finances, create wealth, and transform that wealth into a legacy. And we can't create that legacy if we can't protect that wealth. So that's really important part of creating your legacy, is protecting your wealth. Now I want to talk a little bit about social engineering. And for those of you who don't know what social engineering, it's the psychological manipulation of people into performing or divulging confidential information. And candidates for social engineering attack can range from a corporate executive to an elementary school student. And even the most seasoned IT professionals, as Jim pointed out in his earlier session, can be vulnerable to these types of attacks. And 98% of attacks rely on some form of social engineering. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people think, well, I'm a relatively small business or I'm a small organization, so I don't need to worry about this level of risk. But that's really not valid. And in fact, over 43% of the risk is with small businesses, because these are the most vulnerable, because they are not investing the hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars that are going into the infrastructure and protection that's being done by organizations like Facebook and Microsoft, who are still vulnerable. And so obviously, building the right protection is key. And part of that is technology, and part of that is people. Now, just to give you an idea of where the number of breach incidents come from by sort of type, we've got identity theft is the number one at 65%, account access at 17%, financial access at 13%, sort of nuisance or annoyance at 4%, and the rest falling into 1%. And if we look at where these breaches are coming from, 56% of them are coming from sort of malicious outsiders, 34% from accidental loss. Surprisingly, over 7% are coming from malicious insiders. And then we've got, small 2% of hacktivists who are, actively trying to collect information. Things like the Pandora Papers, which we saw released earlier this week as well. And then 1% falling from unknown. And the numbers of records being exposed through these breaches are massive. And, the stats I have go back to 2018. So basically up these by 900%. In social media alone, it was 2.5 billion records in 2018. And the government, it was 1.2 billion records back in 2018 as well. So you can just use your math in your head and understand the scale that we've seen recently and the number of exposure. The amount of records and data that is out there is insane. So part of what we're going to be talking to you today about is obviously tools and strategies you can use to protect your data, but also tools and strategies that you can use to protect your identity. Because if all this information is floating out there already, what are the tools and strategies you can use today, right now, to protect your information and protect your identity? So some tools and tips for social media prevention. First and foremost, educate yourself. Our first mitigation is security through education. So if people aren't educated on the types of attacks being used, then they can't possibly defend against them, right? So it's really important to do that. And the two most commonly used and effective approaches or pretexts are usually either posing as internal employees or posing as someone hired by the organization. So keep an eye out for those types of things. Also be aware of the information that you are actually releasing. And this tip sort of encompasses both verbal communication as well as social media and Twitter. You see all those posts on social media that are asking a bunch of questions and they sort of gamify it. A lot of those are actually used by hackers to gather and collect information against you. So you really want to be aware of what information you're putting out there into the world. And of course, we've seen all these telemarketing phone calls, people claiming to be CRA or the tax authorities, and we're going to throw you in jail. And they're using that to collect and gather information and to extort you. The other thing that's really important is to determine which of your assets are the most valuable for criminals. Because even companies that actively seek to protect themselves from social engineering attacks often focus on the wrong things. A lot of companies are focusing on protecting their assets that they've used for, generating their business. And that's not necessarily the way the attacker will look at your company. They're going to look for assets that are valuable to them and assets that they can actually monetize. So information is perceived as having no value to you may actually be valuable to hackers. So you have to change your perspective on this from like, what's the information valuable for operating your business to what's the information that's valuable to a hacker. Next, we want to make sure that, as Jim said, we keep our software up to date, because hackers who are using social engineering techniques are often seeking to determine whether you're patched or unpatched, or if you have out-of-date software that they can then later use to exploit. And you know, you really want to be careful of making sure your systems are up to date. And this is a really easy solution to do that is often overlooked. And next, we want to make sure that when we're asked for information, we consider whether the person that we're talking to actually deserves the information that they're asking about. And this is where the rubber really hits the road, right? Whenever you're in a conversation with someone and you don't know, before you answer the question they ask, make sure that they actually deserve to ask the information. Now, sometimes that doesn't always work, as Jim pointed out in his earlier example. Sometimes even the security people can be fooled by that. But doing everything you can to reach out and validate that the requests for information are valid, and think through whether, does it make sense here to provide this information. And then, you know, next we also want to, you know, look for what type of or what questions don't sort of fit the pretext of the conversation. And the last tip sort of leads into this one. So if the person is asking questions that don't fit the persona that they're sort of representing to you, that should really ring off alarm bells to you and be a big thing that you're looking out for. Now, Jim's already talked about phishing, so I'm not going to really talk too much about phishing, because I think, Jim, you did a great job of explaining it. But I will share with you some stats that, you know, 30% of phishing messages get opened by targeted users, and 12% of them are opening these things. So the risk is relatively high. You know, the way that people are able to present information in a really deceptive way that looks legitimate is really important to be aware of. And so these are the most common malicious attachment types. So you've got Office, Archive, PDF. But almost more important than this is, you know, the number one types of documents. So the number one phishing type of document is a bill. So be on the lookout for bills from suppliers that you're not familiar with or that you're not working with, and don't click on those links. Email delivery failure is a really common one. And email is by far the most vulnerable piece of technology that you are using today. And a lot of the email that you guys are using, many of you aren't putting multi-factor on that email. So that is really important to do. Then we have legal and law enforcement. We've seen a lot of these, whether you can sort of lump CRA into there. You know, that's been a big one over the last couple of years. These calls from CRA. And again, people are able to now leverage information that they've collected from data breaches to make that seem even more realistic. And then scanned documents, and lastly, package delivery, which was only about 3.9%, again, back in 2018. But I can tell you from personally anecdotal, the level of package delivery things that I've seen coming through my own personal email that I know are not valid. I order a lot of stuff, but I'm very well aware of every single package that's coming through my door. And you got to be careful of those. So, you know, if you're not expecting a package, don't just assume that some random person has decided to mail you something without notifying you. So that's the, you know, high level on the phishing thing. So how are you going to protect and prevent these phishing attacks? So with users being the sort of weakest link in this chain, and end user training being one of the most effective ways to protect against phishing attacks, there are many ways to train users, but some of the most effective sort of revolve around annual and remedial training courses. Because as Jim said, even in that situation where they trained and then went through a potential test, they failed right after that test. So like many things, Jim, what's that quote you told me that Coca-Cola has about how many times they got to deliver a marketing message? It's like 27 times.
So there's something called effective frequency, and Coke and every other advertiser says, you really haven't seen an ad until you've seen it 4 times in 4 weeks. So they buy what they call effective frequency, a weight of ads in a particular market or aimed at a particular demographic until they get to an average of 4 times in 4 weeks. So some people might be seeing it 16 times and some people none, but they assume you haven't seen it till you've seen it 4 times in 4 weeks. So, we do one training session and then think people have got it.
Absolutely. So we've got to think about that strategy when it comes to cybersecurity, reiterating this message over and over again. So what I can commit to is you're going to see more and more of these sessions from us, and we're going to come back to you with reminders about protecting your data. But getting into the common methods that you can actually use to prevent phishing and whaling attacks. And so Jim, you talked about spearfishing. The other big thing that's coming up now is whale fishing, where they're targeting like the CEO or the president of the organization and impersonating that person. So there's this more perceived importance and credibility behind that person. So you're more likely to respond and provide that information. But basically, you never want to provide personal identifiable information for yourself or members of your organization or clients. You want to verify the email addresses are actually authentic. You never want to click on any unknown links or downloads. You want to also avoid emails that insist you act now. So the fake sense of urgency is really something that they use a lot to try and create this, to play on your emotions effectively. Another great thing is to check for spelling and grammatical mistakes because, well, not all, but a lot of these cyber attacks are coming from outside of North America. I'm not going to name which countries. I think you all know where they're generally.
Russia.
Yeah, Russia, China, even India. I mean, there's a number of countries that are not natively English speaking. So grammar is a great thing to check for. And then sort of create additional authentication policies before obviously wiring, sending money, or might be as simple as requiring a phone call to authorize that payment. Or again, there's great tools out there that can create quality controls and quality assurances in your payment processes. And we'll do whole sessions on some of those tools out there that we use. So those are some tips to protect yourself from phishing attacks. Now we're going to talk a little bit about data breaches. Jim talked about the scale and magnitude of some of these data breaches, and the average cost worldwide is $3.86 million is the average cost. And it typically takes organizations an average of 191 days to identify these data breaches. So that quote, Jim, that you said is so true. There's 2 types of companies out there. Those have been hacked and those that don't know that they have been hacked. And the root causes for these data breaches are at the highest one, negligent employees or contractors at about 48%, third-party mistakes making up another 41%, and then errors in system or operating process, and then external hackers and malicious insiders make up actually a much smaller percentage of these. And so what this really comes down to, again, is it's not so much the technology that's making us vulnerable. It is the human behavior. Now, there is additional technology that we can put in place to basically limit and inhibit some of that bad human behavior. Password protection, multi-factor authentication, firewalls. But if someone is able to walk through the front door with a key because of human error has provided that key, there is little that your systems can do to protect against that. So it really comes back over and over again to this education. So I want to give you some ways to protect your data. And we've got 6 different ways that you can protect your data. Because what we're seeing more and more now is either at least this double approach to hacking, which is where they encrypt the data and steal the data, or this new triple threat approach. So data backup solutions are really critical. So no matter how good your security is, new exploits appear almost every day, and there's always going to be a risk. And with the rise of quantum computing, which potentially can be used on the good side, but potentially used on the bad side, there's always going to be risk out there. And one of the most importance of your security stack should be to make sure that you have a data backup solution that helps you recover quickly if you need to. Password managers and 2-step or multi-step authentication is really important because you're likely to access dozens of applications. As we move into the cloud, I know for myself, I've got like over 70 applications that I access over the internet. And I know that because I use a secure password manager, and it gives me a count of all the tools that I use. And we're going to give you some tools and recommendations for some of those password protection and two-step authentication tools out there. But two-step authentication, we see it obviously in banks. We know what two-step and multi-factor authentication is. And two-step is basically just one other method. Multi-factor is one other method, but it could be biometric, it could be phone, or it could be an authenticator. There's lots of different ways that go into multi-factor. One of the most important things to do, as Jim pointed out, we often rely on our phones as being the number one way of protecting. And Jim had a situation personally where they tried to access his SIM card, which would have effectively given them some way to access all the stuff that's multi-factor protected. So one of the things that you want to do is using authenticators, or things that are not relying so much on your cell phone, but an actual authenticator app that you are using. So you're seeing
around that, Andrew, I think we'll get to multi-factor where it'll be my cell phone, my voice print, and my thumbprint.
Yeah.
So even if they've changed my SIM, they're not going to have my voice print and my thumbprint on top of hacking my SIM by getting to my carrier.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were also talking about blockchain being the future. I was talking with, one of the beautiful things is I have so many clients who actually work in the cybersecurity space. So I was having a great conversation with one of our clients the other day who was talking about a project that he's working on, which is going to be using blockchain that will effectively allow you will hold all the power of your information, and you will release and provide that information on a need-to-know basis, and it will be you who's providing access to that. And so we're going to see blockchain. And Jim, you and I have personally talked about AI and how AI will play a big role, and basically being able to identify, hey, this what's going on here is not consistent with normal human behavior. Even though it's a perfectly authentic login, they've got the keys to the front door, the activity that's taking place is not consistent with the activity that's taken place in the past. And we're going to see more of that. But that's, again, sort of looking to the future rather than where we are today. Getting back to where we are today is antivirus software, right? A good antivirus software will go a long way in protecting you from the types of malware that we're at least aware of. And while it won't prevent every data breach, it will secure you from the majority of viruses and malicious programs that we're at least aware of today. A firewall is another tool that's great. A firewall lets you monitor incoming and outgoing traffic throughout your network and block sort of unauthorized access. And if you have multiple staff members that are accessing sensitive data at your organization, it's definitely worth investing in a firewall or establishing stronger controls with endpoint discovery or and response EDR programs like CrowdStrike, which are great programs for more sophisticated organizations. And then encryption software. So encryption software helps you to sort of prevent unauthorized access to digital information using cryptography, and it sort of obscures the content of a file. For example, on a financial statement, it can keep the records obscured until the file is unencrypted, usually by entering a password. And if you're storing or transferring sensitive client information, it's imperative to encrypt that data. And a lot of people don't realize what is and what is not encrypted. And people are sending information flying around the internet through email, which is not a form of encrypted transmission. Now, there are like Proton Mail and there are forms of encrypted email, but Outlook and Gmail are not encrypted and they are not safe for sharing any form of sensitive information. And email is arguably the #1 target for threat actors. And then lastly, sort of reliable technology partners. And while this isn't a technology solution, it's important to keep in mind that every application you use has a team of reliable people behind it, and that the firms, as a firm, you need assurance that these teams are themselves responsive and client-centric when it comes to dealing with potential breaches. So we're now into sort of a shared responsibility model, and it's important that when you are sharing responsibility, that the people you're sharing responsibility are taking security as seriously as you are. Lastly, or almost lastly, I want to bring you to a great sort of quick and easy security stack that we think will help a lot of you. So LastPass is a password manager tool that we think is amazing. They offer a free version if you're just a basic user and individual. They offer a family version if you're looking to protect your entire family and share passwords with your family members. And we're talking about sharing passwords in a secure way, right? Never, ever, ever email your passwords or accounts. I don't care what value you're getting by sharing your Netflix account. Don't do it, right? You know what I mean? There are ways to legitimately share information through LastPass. And of course, they have business versions as well that give you a whole bunch of great value. And we've been able to negotiate some wholesale pricing on LastPass, which is amazing. So we can get you 50% off the retail pricing. Duo Security is one of the favorite multi-factor authentication tools out there. It's an amazing tool. It's what we use internally. It allows you to put multi-factor onto all those things that don't natively have multi-factor. And rewind backups. I mean, there's a number of different ways to do backups. Rewind backups is specific to the cloud environment. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware of that as a great tool for QuickBooks and Xero, obviously specific to our little space here. And the other thing I want to talk to you a little bit about are Borrowwell and Credit Karma. And the reason I want to talk about these is these aren't necessarily part of your app stack to prevent the information from being lost. It's to identify when it has. So Borrowwell and Credit Karma are effectively tools that allow you to go in and monitor your credit reports on a regular basis. And this is really the number one way to make sure that your identity is safe, is to monitor your credit. And you can get a free Equifax report and a TransUnion report, but I think they limit you, if I'm not mistaken, to once a year. Whereas Borrowwell will refresh your data and Credit Karma will refresh your data once a week. Now, these tools are also free, which is amazing. How they make their money is by recommending you tools like credit cards and loans and stuff like that, which you have no obligation to subscribe to, but they're a great free resource for being able to go in and manage your credit score to make sure that no one is going in and leveraging the information they've been able to collect from these, billions of pieces of data that are flying around the internet right now to leverage that to attack your personal wealth. So these are some great tools. I'm sure that people have more information, more questions. So there's some great resources that we'll provide links to. We'll share the links on the Facebook post later today when we update the feed. So we've got cybersecurity for small businesses, which is put on by the Chamber of Commerce in the US. And then we've got Internet Security Essentials for Business, which is another great guide. And then we have our own security checklist that we've developed with help and resources from some of the partners that we are working with to help protect your information internally. So I think this is a great guide for everyone. And I hope that you guys have found this session helpful. Of course, if you do have more questions and want to reach out and connect with us, come to our website, cpa4it.ca. Check us out on all the different social media channels. We're here on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you out there. And of course, you can always give us a call or shoot us an email. Now, one other tool that we use internally, for those of you who are clients, we are encouraging you not to communicate with us by email and instead to use our communication platform, Lisio, which is, again, a more secure form of communication where the communication that you're receiving through the Lisio app is from us and not from anyone pretending to be us, which, as we've seen from this presentation, is becoming a greater and greater risk. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Jim, for joining us today. It was amazing to have you with us. I do see a couple of things that have come up in the Q&A. And
so one question in the Q&A was for Darlene, from Darlene. She asked, what's an example of information a criminal might find of value that you wouldn't realize. And if I'm a homeowner and I've gone on holiday for 2 weeks and my fridge is IoT enabled, and a hacker can get in and see that I haven't opened, nobody in the house has opened the fridge for 2 weeks. They can go, oh, these people on holiday, we can break into the house. So, who thinks fridge IT security is important? Similarly, there are data sources. And when you get a new device like a webcam from China, it comes with a password to log into it of admin,
Yeah.
and like 40% of devices attached to home networks have the original default password, which means your home network isn't secure. So there are some 101 things that we need to do to make our networks more secure. I'll let you answer the next question, Andrew, which is from Sanjeev.
Yeah, it's a long one, so give me a second on that. But also just to add in with Darlene, speaking specific to my industry and accounting and finance, obviously the things that stand out to us are, your name, your address, your social insurance number. Those are the things that are obvious to people have value. But understanding your buying behavior has value because then that allows them to impersonate you more readily. Knowing who are the people who work in your organization, who are the decision makers in your organization, like your org chart. You probably don't think your org chart has value, but to a hacker who's trying to social engineer an attack on you, an organization chart is a great piece of information, right? And then you start looking at things and these are the things we see on Facebook, like what's the name of your first pet? Answers that you don't think are innocent until you realize, hey, wait a minute, these are the security questions that are most often used as a multi-factor form of authentication or for resetting your password. And you're thinking that these are, hey, I'm just telling people what my name of my first pet was, but you're using that as, in security protection over here at your bank or, on CRA's site. So these are the types of information that I think often people don't recognize the value of them. And quite frankly, are giving them out freely on Facebook all the time. So the next question is, re-identity theft. Given the pandemic, taking vaccine from different clinics, pharmacies, then taking a test from different facilities and going to places to get antigen PCR tests done for travel, our most personal identification and information is all over the place. I believe at some point this exposure will come back and hit us. How do we prepare and protect and mitigate from this type of exposure? So again, the number one thing that you can do is going back to what we talked about today, is being vigilant on these phishing attacks, because information that they gather, if they don't have access to the critical information that they need in order to steal your identity, they're going to leverage phishing to try and gain that, or they're going to leverage phishing to try and get access to information that you do value that they can extort you for, right? And this cyber terrorism and extortion and ransom that we're seeing going on is incredible. And what you don't realize is how many people are actually paying this ransom. And what that's doing is, making this more of an industry for people, which is why you've seen Biden in the US come out really focused on this and trying to discourage people from paying these ransoms. Because obviously you can understand the desire to get back into business, to not have that information released, whatever it might be, but the problem with paying those ransoms is twofold. One, first and foremost, it encourages people to continue doing what they're doing. Secondly, you don't know where this money is going, and you are potentially funding terrorism. And a little known fact about paying these ransoms is there's only certain organizations that are actually legally able to pay ransoms, because if you pay a ransom in a ransomware thing, and a ransomware attack, you could be charged with funding terrorism depending upon where this money is going. So you really, yes, we got to be vigilant. We got to make sure that we're being suspicious of every email. And unfortunately, it's an era where we have to be suspicious of everybody. I'm by nature a very trusting individual, but unfortunately, we all have to change that nature and be a lot more suspicious when it comes to anything other than face-to-face interaction with someone we know and trust. And even that could be changing in the near future. So I think that's all the questions that we've had come through. Again, Jim, I really do appreciate you coming in and joining us today. Great session. I'd love to have you back. Well, as you said, it's really important to reiterate these this message. And I know I won't be waiting another year for Cybersecurity Month again. We will be coming back. We will be making this a really important component of who we are as an organization. And from my personal perspective, to any of the accountants and bookkeepers who are out there who are tuning in to us, the accounting profession is out there telling us that we are the stewards of data, and data is the future, and AI and all this stuff. And they're not talking to you about cybersecurity. And those small one-man and two-man shops that are out there, you guys are taking an enormous risk. And there's lots of vulnerabilities that you have. You need to up your game, step into the future, and see security as a part of operating your business in the modern era. So thank you again, Jim, and we'll see everybody soon. Bye for now.